Joining us right now to discuss, former U.S. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller. Colonel, your thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine right now, sir?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Bob, Heather. It's a dangerous time right now. President Biden has clearly communicated what Putin is doing with his asymmetric gray zone forces. And so I do give him credit. There is something to that. However, I don't think we've tapped into the utility of NATO as effectively as we could have. There is something to be said about us blowing up this threat to kind of distract from the Afghanistan withdrawal that took place. But in terms of countering the gray zone actors, the non-state actors that Russia uses to destabilize the region on eastern Ukraine, communicating clearly what they're going to do does kind of take the wind out of their asymmetric attack.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a chess match, as the New York Times is doing there, why is it up to Putin to make the first move? Why are we following his move, leading from behind, basically? Today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov spoke out against the Western nations, threatening Russia with sanctions. Listen to this.
The West feels entitled to dictate how we should behave, whatever we should do on our own territory. This is a basic lack of education. I hope that other Western countries are more responsible players and they will stop this attempt to provoke waves of sanction wars and will not support it. In any case, the Russian government and, I'm sure, our parliament will not stay indifferent regarding what they do in the West.
So do you think this is just his way of changing the narrative, or does the West bear some responsibility for amplifying what Lavrov calls their hysteria?
The bottom line is the Russians do have the initiative, because if they're going to go on the offensive, they decide when. So there's an inherent through this operation place where we have to be defensive. But absolutely a sovereign nation, whether you want to call it Western, Eastern countries, no one has the ability to invade a sovereign country unprovoked. I think international norms dictate that pretty clearly. And so my opinion is that is the Russians just trying to spin the narrative, but very clearly you can't invade a sovereign nation without repercussions.
When you say asymmetrical attacks from Russia, I think you're referring to cyber attacks. Where do we stand as a world community on cyber attacks? Are they not considered an act of war, because that is what's being imposed right now on Ukraine by Russia?
That's a good question, Bob. The military community is very conflicted on, does cyber necessitate war? And depending on the experts that you speak to, there's differing opinions. But the bottom line is you go to war if your vital interests are threatened. And if you can, with a cyber attack, turn off power grids, turn off water supplies, do things like this, you could make the legal argument that it is a vital interest. So it's somewhere in the gray area that military experts haven't even clearly defined. But absolutely, the Russians have perfected how to use cyber to turn off electromagnetic spectrums, depending on where and when and what effect they want to achieve.
Do you trust President Biden to make the correct decisions, or listen to the correct people, or even take their advice, given the reaction from President Biden claiming that he rejected the results of a U.S. Army investigative report in which military officials reportedly criticized his administration's Afghanistan withdrawal process?
Yeah, Heather, I've read that whole investigative report. I don't understand. Actually, his response was, I reject it. But when the interviewer was asking him follow-up questions, he couldn't really clearly explain what he was rejecting. The bottom line is it fell apart because the Department of State and Department of Defense were both looking at each other, not knowing what to do. They weren't able to coordinate. The person over those two departments is the president. So the bottom line is the president failed to get them to do what they needed to do. Now, I had more faith in my military leaders. I thought my military leaders should be the experts on the ground advising and taking action. And ultimately, General McKenzie, the CENTCOM combatant commander, just said he was following orders and didn't do what I expected a senior military leader to do. So now when we're talking Ukraine, it's the European combatant commander. So somebody different. I would like to think that the military combatant commander could give good advice and counsel President Biden But yes, to your point, Heather, history has not demonstrated that we are very good at this under this current administration and these current senior military leaders.
Yeah.
Colonel Scheller, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me.